So I hope that wraps things up pretty well for the Liberty Conspiracy News Notes. And again, if you want to find any of those stories or the embedded production work we did, just check it out inside the news notes if you're a paid subscriber over there. And thank you for the $5 contribution. I haven't seen if there are any other ones, but I really appreciate that tonight. Very, very great of you to show that you appreciate what we're doing, and great kindred spirits for everybody who joins us in the chats here on X or inside Rumble. Remember, you can contact me on the back side of X or email me at libertyconspiracy@yahoo.com. Now, let's take the opportunity to get into Fiction Friday, everybody. Let's do it up. You guys got some pizza going, maybe? Stuff like that? Well, we've got that story that we promised on Wednesday, a story that was uncovered decades after this man passed away. His real name, Charles Nutt, born in Chicago, died at the age of 38. And I knew people who knew him and loved him. And so we're going to read a story by the legendary Twilight Zone writer and short story writer Charles Beaumont. It's time for us to go to Fiction Friday and former Star Trek writing fellow side of things, the control voice from my old stomping grounds.
Nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
All right, Outer Limits. Yes, indeed. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy Friday on a Fiction Friday, April 10th, 2026. High fives to everybody from the former Star Trek writing fellow side of things to you inside the Liberty Conspiracy chat or after the fact. Thanks for finding us. Remember, you can find the former Star Trek writing fellow channel on YouTube and on Rumble. You can follow me at Gard Goldsmith and check out the Gardner Goldsmith Substack, where you'll find the information on writers. You'll find the audio podcast for our Liberty Conspiracy show, which is on Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. live on Rumble and X at Gard Goldsmith. And you'll get to see some of the things that we like to do on Wednesdays with Wordsmith Wednesday and what we like to do on Tuesdays now with Television Tuesday. I love being able to talk about creative minds. One of them we mentioned was Charles Beaumont. And I didn't bring it up before, but his real name, of course, was Charles Nutt, as we noted here. As Fantastic Fiction notes, one of Alfred Hitchcock's favorite writers, Beaumont was also a contributor to Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone and Ray Bradbury's science fantasy anthologies. He also wrote film scripts with Richard Matheson and Ray Russell for Roger Corman, some of those great Edgar Allan Poe, Roger Corman films, and others. His only novel, The Intruder, was filmed by Roger Corman with William Shatner in the title role. In 1964, he was stricken with a rare illness that eventually took his life at age 38. As I mentioned to you, my friend William F. Nolan was super close friends with Charles Beaumont and described how it looked like it was not Alzheimer's, it was not some strange disease that just struck him. It was a tonic that he was drinking that had some sort of metal in it that hurt him, damaged his nervous system, and eventually killed him. You can see he also wrote as Keith Grantland, and here are some of the materials that you can find if you're looking for his work. Novels, Run from the Hunter as Keith Grantland, and then The Intruder. And now there are lots of re-releases here. I've got Yonder. That's a great little collection. Then Touch of the Creature, now re-released. You can see some of these all the way down to here with novellas and others. There's the Howling Man. I called it the Laughing Man. It was the Howling Man from Twilight Zone. Classic story. The Howling Man. What a great story that was. And, of course, Charles Beaumont had a story that did not appear, as so many authors do. Before we tell you about that story, I want to show you the man I did not show you, the other Charles Beaumont, just in case anybody's interested. This is Charles Beaumont, worked undercover as an MI6 operative in war zones, different person, on diplomatic missions and in international business. His work spanned 2 decades and 4 continents. This is his first novel, A Spy Alone by Charles Beaumont. That's a different Charles Beaumont, released in 2025, November. So he's just starting, okay? So figured that I'd mention that to you, just in case you were interested in that. And he's got a review, a blurb on there by a writer who did a book called The Persian. Ironic, we'd be talking about all the attacks on Iran going on right now. So that's the other Charles Beaumont. We'll go back to the Twilight Zone Charles Beaumont and my friend's friend. And then, as I mentioned, George Clayton Johnson was a buddy of mine, and George and Bill Nolan wrote Logan's Run, and Charles Beaumont was a friend of theirs, along with Richard Matheson. And I noted that he was born, of course, Charles Nutt, and he was born in Chicago in 1929. And his bio, according to the Valancourt Books people, he dropped out of high school in the 10th grade and worked at a number of jobs before selling his first short story to Amazing Stories in 1950. His story, Black Country, in 1954, was the first work of short fiction to appear in Playboy, and his classic tale, The Crooked Man, appeared in the same magazine the following year. Beaumont published numerous other short stories in the 1950s, both in mainstream periodicals like Playboy and Esquire, and in science fiction and fantasy magazines. His first story collection, The Hunger and Other Stories, was published in 1957 to immediate acclaim and was followed by 2 further collections, Yonder, 1958, and Night Ride and Other Journeys, 1960. He also published 2 novels, Run from the Hunter, 1957, synonymously as Keith Grantland, along with John E. Tomerlin, and The Intruder, which we mentioned, of course. Beaumont is perhaps best remembered for his work in TV, particularly his screenplays for The Twilight Zone, for which he wrote several of the most famous episodes. His other screenwriting credits include the scripts for films such as The Premature Burial, 1962, of course, Roger Corman, Burn Witch Burn, 1962, The Haunted Palace, 63, and Mask of the Red Death, 64. You know, Vincent Price, Peter Lorre, Boris Karloff, they were in a lot of those. They added a lot of humor to those. They're fun. When Beaumont was 34, he began to suffer from ill health and developed a baffling and still unexplained condition that caused him to age at a greatly increased rate, such that at the time of his death, at age 38 in 1967, he had the physical appearance of a 95-year-old man. Beaumont was survived by his wife, Helen, 2 daughters, and 2 sons, one of whom, Christopher, is also a writer. And I'm going to look up Christopher. Beaumont's work was much respected by his colleagues, and he counted Ray Bradbury, Harlan Ellison, Richard Matheson, Robert Bloch, Roger Corman, William F. Nolan, and George Clayton Johnson as his friends and admirers. His work is in the process of being rediscovered with new editions of several of his books, recently appearing from Centipede Press, good publication, good publishing company, and a new edition of The Hunger from Valancourt Books. So again, if we go back over to fantastic fiction, I'll scroll down again. There's that version from Valancourt Books, The Hunger. That's a great, it reminds me of The Man with the Golden Arm, the opening of that, the graphics. That was a great movie. Oh, that was a fantastic movie. Frank Sinatra was great in that movie. And it's sad. It's a very sad movie, but it's got a lot of noir aspects to it. So I want to tell you about a story that I heard about and found. One of my favorite audio sites, and it is audio, even though they're videos, is Quasar Spectra over at YouTube. And the guy who does Quasar Spectra is always finding good stuff. And he does some of the things that I do, like, you know that something might be in the public domain and it might be available on the Internet Archive or something like that, which, by the way, is constantly under threat. And so he'll get that, and he does readings of these stories. And he sticks with pre-1990s science fiction. Great stuff that appeared in, so many of the great classic science fiction magazines, right? Some of the pulps, Isaac Asimov's magazines, those things, right? Omni, that sort of stuff. And Omni was a little later too. But there was a story that did not appear until 1999 by Charles Beaumont. And I do want to mention just briefly before I go into it, sorry for the diversion. As I mentioned on Wednesday, what Bill Nolan told me was we were chatting about Charles Beaumont, because they were really, really close. He said, yeah, when Chuck was getting sick, we would call up, we'd see, we'd check in, see how things were going with our friends. And I would ask him, or George or Richard, hey, how's it going? And he was having trouble, and he was trying to get through these assignments. He's like, I'm having a hard time. I'm kind of lost on this. And, he said, so he and those guys, he said, what many people don't know is that a lot of his final scripts were either co-written or ghost-written by us, because we knew he was sick and he couldn't do it. And that's how much they cared about him and his family. And, they knew that this was his bread and butter. So they tried to help him. And I got really choked up when I thought about that. Bill Nolan, what a great guy Bill Nolan was. And Jason and Sonny Brock, I mentioned Jason and Sonny. I didn't mention the last names last time, but if you look up just Sonny, Jasunni Productions, I'd like to get Jason and Sonny on. They're great and really fun people. And they became friends with Bill, again, co-writer of Logan's Run with George. And Bill ended up moving up into Portland and lived with them last number of years of his life, and had, tons and tons more stories written, and did great with them. They all had a blast. They used to travel together. It was great. And it was so much fun hanging out with them. So I asked Bill, I said, it was Bill and Jason and Sonny and I were sitting around. And I asked Bill, I said, what was the story? I heard he had Alzheimer's. He goes, no, God, it wasn't Alzheimer's. He said, a lot of people say that it was Alzheimer's, but it wasn't. It was, from what I think, he said he got this company in the 50s or 60s. It was the 60s, I guess. He said, and it was this fizzy drink. It was like a lemon lime flavor, like an early soda type thing. It had a carbonation in it, and you'd pour it in your water, and he would drink it as a drink. And it wasn't alcoholic or anything, but it was his flavorful drink, and he loved it. And he said, what I think was going on is, I think there was some sort of metal in that, like as a preservative or whatever, or I don't know what. I don't have all the details, and I can't ask Bill because he's passed away. Maybe Jason remembers. Jason's actually, just Sonny Productions did a documentary video about Charles Beaumont. I'll have to get Jason on. I'll get Jason on to talk about it. I want to get Jason on anyway. Jason and Sonny are great. But I think, Bill was pretty certain. He said it was this drink, and it poisoned his nervous system, and it destroyed his mind. And he said, we just, by the time I even came to think of it, either he didn't think of it till after, or it was too late or something. But the dynamic of how it is when you're friends with somebody, you just don't know. And then maybe it comes to you later. Gosh, just tough, tough stuff. And again, for those of us who are outside that human to human connection, we see storytelling and so on. And sometimes I think it's difficult. I went through a process, which actually I'm glad that I'm not in Hollywood anymore, because I was brought up thinking of television as a way to express stories and things like that, but I never really connected that it was a profession like any other profession until I went to work there. And I went first to Outer Limits in Vancouver. And even then, when I was in the writers' rooms, it wasn't the same as going down on the set and meeting the carpenters, the dudes who were working there. And they were just great skilled laborers, and they got a lot of different jobs. They were always working every week doing a new set. It was a great gig for these guys. They were local dudes from Vancouver or Burnaby or whatever. Some of them had gone to school with Cam Neely and Michael J. Fox, and they both lived like just up the street. Their families still lived up the street from where I lived. So it was a real small community, but the studio had moved into this area, which was just east of Vancouver proper, off of the Lougheed Highway. And it was called the Bridge Studios. And you can look it up on a map. You'll see the Bridge Studios as an Earl's restaurant. Somebody in the chat even mentioned, Earl's is still there. It was a great restaurant. So I didn't realize it till later. You get these images in your mind of these people who worked before you, Rod Serling, and they're iconic figures. And so in a way, it's been very beneficial for me to have been removed from Los Angeles after getting that taste, not getting super success. And I could have gotten much more success if I had sued a couple people who had stolen stories from me, but I didn't do it, because I didn't want to get involved with it. I didn't want to use the justice system because I'm an anarchist. I don't want to use people's tax money to get what I thought was owed me and stuff like that. And there are a lot of other factors that I had to consider in not doing this. But that would have been a lot of money, and I'd still be working in L.A. But as I mentioned, I wouldn't have come back home to been holding my mother's hand when she passed away. As tragic as that is, I was holding her hand. I wouldn't have been there to help my niece or to climb the trees to save the cat, just to pet the cat, to say hi to somebody who might have been having a rough day. Those little things are extremely important, to be here with you guys, right? And you probably have circumstances like that yourselves. I'll call that the Candide experience, because that's what Dr. Pangloss describes, how God has a plan. And even when you think it's not right, it is in God's plan. You have to take advantage of what you think God is telling you to do. So anyway, Bill had his time and got out, did pretty well, and then was writing a lot of prose short stories. And we would chat, and he told me these things. And you think about a guy like Charles Beaumont and his friends helping him that way. And it really hit me also when I met Rod Serling's family. Because again, you hear about these figures that you really admire, these people and their work, and it's all part of a production and all this stuff, and it's wonderful and it's so iconic. You watch it over and over, you memorize the lines, you see the actors. There's all these different dimensions to it. To coin a phrase, talking about Twilight Zone, there are 5 dimensions. And then you meet the kids of Rod Serling and realize they were teenagers when he died, their father. So it really humanizes everybody, and it's a very strange thing. And you realize just how fleeting life is, which gets me frustrated because I've been so sick. I wanted to get married, have a family. It's just been really, really tough, And you take it as it is. You take it as it goes, and you try to do what you can. So let me give you this, because this was a story that Charles Beaumont wrote himself in the 50s, one of his short stories. And you'll see something that I discovered that I don't think anybody else discovered. And it has to do, I won't even say anything. All I'm going to say is, no, I won't even say anything. I won't say anything. Here is the story. And you'll find this. This is actually, I haven't released this. This is on the back end of my Substack. Okay. I copied and pasted it. Okay. Resurrection Island by Charles Beaumont. The story, Resurrection Island by Charles Beaumont. There's no exact date for when he wrote this. It was written sometime in the 1950s. This story from the frequent Twilight Zone writer did not see print until 1999 in a collection of previously unpublished tales entitled A Touch of a Creature, then republished in the September 2000 issue of Cemetery Dance magazine. That was the one that Tom Monteleone used to write for every month for the Mafia column. That was the magazine, Cemetery Dance. So here we go. Resurrection Island. I was trying to talk the receptionist into a weekend at Palm Springs when the call came in. It was from Welch. He almost never called. One of those in at 10, out at 11 bosses. The successful kind. And that's why I jumped. He was drinking milk out of a martini glass as I walked in. The shades were drawn. Everything was quiet. You wanted me? I asked. He put down the glass and coughed. Welch had ulcers. Yes, what are you working on? I wasn't working on anything. But you learn to think fast in Hollywood. The Sinatra thing. He looked puzzled for a second. Then he said, well, drop it. Turn that over to Mike. Oh, what's up? I don't know, he said. It was hard to think of this guy as the head of a string of movie fan magazines. He used to be a city editor on a New York sheet that folded. Then he bought a dying rag somewhere in Oklahoma, and it folded too. Then he borrowed some dough and started Movie Secrets. It didn't fold. I guess that's what gave him ulcers. Artie, I don't know what's up. Maybe something big, maybe nothing at all. He reached across the desk and tossed a stray paper my way. I got a rumble, he said. A rumble from Angelino. Angelino? Well, that's a 4.5-inch newsie on a strip. A little blackmail here, a little informing there. He got the info. People, of course, pitied him. But they would tell him things, too, if he had the right angle. And he told us things. I flipped to the page Welch had marked in grease pencil. It contained an ad in this paper. Ripped from the paper, not very big, not much different from all the other ads you'd see. Extras wanted. 10,000 extras needed urgently. By Carl Grushkin. Will guarantee double guild minimum pay. Many speaking parts. The chance of a lifetime. Write inquiry stating qualifications to P.O. Box 304, Los Angeles, California. You'll be damned, Welch said, right? Yeah, I said. I thought that louse Grushkin was dead. So did everybody else. He got up, and Welch walked over to the portable bar, returning with a bottle of milk. Half a cork disappeared down his throat. Well? He asked. I looked at the paper. A gag, I said, and not a funny one either. Most of the extras in town were starving. Not that things were bad. At least a third of the lots were working, but the pictures were serious type. No casts of thousands, no Indian uprisings, no Arab wars, no great atmosphere. You think it's a gag? Hell yes. It was a typical Grushkin prank. In his day, he was probably the best known, most successful director in the world. And I suppose a lot of people were for him because his pictures were big and that meant work. David, the film, was his first spectacle. You probably remember David, a fantastic, sprawling thing full of blood and sex and scripture. It cleaned up at the box office. Then came the remake of D.W. Griffith's Intolerance. 5.5 hours and panorama scope, location shooting in 6 countries, $15 million budget. a smash. And then the Battle of Dunkirk, which gave a job to every extra in town. Another smash. But not everyone loved him. Only those who didn't get close, who could sit back and chuckle over his distanced eccentricities. A lot of others hated his guts. I was one of them. Never mind why. Let's just say that as a fan magazine writer, I write a lot. I called Grushkin Janus in my column once and damn near got fired. It was true. While one of his faces grinned on the multitudes and uttered blessings, the other arranged for executions. And there were plenty of those, especially among the weak and helpless, the sick, the disturbed. Anyway, the guy, he made one more picture, Gettysburg. It outdid all his others, broke the attendance records from New York to Bangkok, and paused one columnist to write, with this film, Carl Grushkin has carried the so-called spectacle to its final limits. There's nothing else in the way of realism that could possibly be done with a camera. The creature, as he was called, had announced plans for another movie. Then suddenly he disappeared. Nobody knew where he went. Probably to Africa for some big game shooting, or Tibet maybe. He wasn't heard from for over a year. Then he returned, looking pretty much his old self, too. Cocky, confident, assured, like a 5-year-old grinning with a dirty secret. But unlike the Grushkin of before, he didn't talk much. When he bought that island off the coast of Baja and named it Resurrection, even then, he didn't talk about it. And once that immense stone wall was built around the island, it must have been, say, 3 years ago, there wasn't a peep from him. Are you remembering? Welch asked. I nodded. So you still think it's a gag? I don't know. What do you figure? Another spectacle, Welch said, hitting the milk. Closed set. Hush, hush. Big splash. Later on, Artie. I feel this coming. The way you feel the dentist drill a second before it hits your tooth. Well, the Fortune Cleaners was a rundown trap on the wrong side of L.A., across from the trucking joints, and I went over to it. I stood in front of it, shuffling my feet, trying to get warm, and so did 30 other guys. This was where we were supposed to meet. It was 6:15 in the morning. At 6:30, a bus was supposed to show. Getting into the Extras Guild was impossible on such short notice, so I had to turn crafty. I knew a fellow named Sandy McLaughlin. He'd been one of the best paid character actors in the business. Then, in that mysterious way, all of a sudden, nobody wanted him anymore. And he had sunk to bit parts and finally to extra roles. But he didn't like it. When I asked for the loan of his card, he said sure, provided I'd give him what he'd have made off of Grushkin, double SEG rates. Of course, he had planned to go himself, so had every out-of-work extra in town planned to go. So, why not? After the switch, he filled me in. At a certain time, I was to appear at a certain address. They would phone me later, where I, as Sandy, would be picked up and taken to San Felipe, a little village in Baja, on the edge of the Gulf. He also showed me a contract that he had to sign. The first page read, I, James Andrews McLaughlin, do hereby offer my services as actor to Resurrection Films Incorporated, and in particular to Carl Grushkin, producer and director. I will perform willingly and without coercion of any kind, any and all duties listed on pages 4 and 5 of this agreement. Further, I asked him what the angle was. Stunt stuff, I guess. I guess, he said. There was a lot of it in Gettysburg. And some people had gotten hurt. They sued, protecting himself, of course. He fought back. And by the way, would Grushkin recognize you? I asked. With me, I was taking a chance. I doubt it, Sandy said. Most extras don't have faces, buddy. They're just atmosphere. So he got the call after a few days, and he phoned me. The Fortune Cleaners, 3rd Street, 6:30 a.m., and don't ask me anything else. I rubbed the smog out of my eyes and walked to the back of the pack when I arrived. Nobody knew me. At 6:30 in the morning, on the button, a bus rolled up. It looked like one of the regular city jobs, only painted plain gray. The driver opened the door and got out. All right, over here, he said. Let's do this quick as we can. Have your contracts ready. And we lined up. When I got to the entrance, he took Sandy's papers. McLaughlin? Yes. Sandy never palled around with regular extras too much. A snob, thank God. So in 3 minutes, we were on the road. When we pulled into San Felipe, it was nearly midnight. Outside, it looked like day. Big moon, lots of stars. I could see 20 or more buses parked on the shoulder by a little cemetery with about 300 people milling around. Beyond them, the town itself, a fistful of clay shacks. And beyond that, the black water of the Gulf. Follow me, the driver said. We walked over to the crowd, waited for a couple more buses, then filed down the dusty path through town to the beach. 3 40-passenger lifeboats were waiting. They filled up fast and glided off, getting swallowed by the darkness. Then they came back. I got on number 3 toward the bow. The oars were quiet as we slid out to sea. Another 10 minutes, and I saw our destination. The Gander, Grishkin's own private yacht. It wasn't as large as Onassis's, but it was large enough. Over 1 million had gone into it. The lifeboats came in 15 times. The lifeboats came in 15 times. Then the Gander upped anchor, and we headed due south into the blackness. It got cold about then, so I stopped one of the crew, a hefty Mexican guy. Any particular cabin? He shook his head. Either he hadn't understood, or the answer was no. I found a door and opened it. Inside, 4 by nothing, 1 bunk, occupied. It was a dame, but her back was toward me. Mind if I use the floor? I said. No answer. I rolled my jacket into a pillow and slept like a TV repairman. When the bell started clanging hours later, I woke up and discovered 2 interesting things. The first was outside the portal. Resurrection Island, half a mile away. The second was standing over me. One of the most beautiful girls I'd ever seen. Some women are dumped off the assembly line, and other women are hand-built. This one was hand-built from the ground up. They'd taken special care above the waist. Who are you? She said. Sandy McLaughlin. That's a lie. I've worked with Sandy. I gave her the story. She shrugged and lit a cigarette. Maybe you'll write something about me someday, Mr. Wilde. Her name was Gloria Martin, from Nowhereville, Idaho. Came to Hollywood to be a star. Kicked around the offices, landed a few TV jobs, not many, not enough. The usual, central casting was inevitable. Maybe I will write something, I said. You're pretty enough. Got talent? Yeah, she said, but only for acting. And I understand that's only step number one, sometimes. Mostly those are the breaks for women around here. I know a lot of dolls with sore behinds who never made it and never will. I know a few of the other kind who are doing okay. Don't get the couch complex, I said. And she looked mad for a second. Then she smiled. You're okay, Mr. Wilde, she said. I don't know exactly why I like you. You're not very good looking, and you're a little old, but you're okay. Everybody likes me, I told her, for the first 5 minutes. We did a silent scene then, and somebody knocked on the door and shouted, "On deck!" And that broke the silence. Afterwards, afterwards, I said. And she said, afterwards. We joined the gang and got a real look at Resurrection Island. Alcatraz never seemed grimmer. The wall was at least 50 feet high, made out of solid concrete blocks. It edged around the whole island, which I figured to be about 3 miles square. The top was a mess of camouflage, painted canvas, twigs, brush, leaves. People had tried to get in when the news was hot, but no one had ever made it. It was private property. A small guy with a big limp led us up the stairs, which had been carved from boulders, and then he held his hand in the air. Most of the extras were feeling all right, talking softly, giggling, as if they'd each had a couple of whiskeys or something. Big Limp went over to a huge door and lifted a knocker. It fell with a deep crash. Next to me, Gloria was shivering a little in the exposed air. There was the sound of logs scraping and hinges growing, and then slowly, the giant door began to open. Somebody said, "Damn!" And he was right. Inside, there was a set, but it was different from any set I had ever seen inside those walls. You kick around the studios long enough, you finally get to tell plaster from brick. There wasn't any plaster here. Big Limp took us through a small field of dust and crushed rock, through a valley of hills and boulders and immense trees, past an amphitheater that was a ringer for the Roman Colosseum, and finally past the gate of a stone fortress to a clutch of green Quonset huts. "You'll find your own rooms," he said. "Costumes will be fitted at 11:15. Gloria put her hand on my arm. "Would you mind the floor again?" she said. "For some reason, Artie, I'd like to have you around." We cut out for one of the huts. Inside of an hour, we were getting along fine. She talked a lot. I learned all about her family, her dreams, her ambitions, her defenses. At 11:15, a fat woman asked our sizes. At 12, she came back with 2 bundles. Mine contained a helmet, a shield, a breastplate, and all the other paraphernalia the Roman soldiers were supposed to have worn. Gloria's was simpler, a gauzy, flowing white dress with pins that pinned it around her. Grushkin was going for the Quo Vadis routine. Why all this hanky-panky? Why the cloak and dagger methods? We'd been told to dress right away, so we did. I was given instructions by the girl to turn my head away while she changed, and damned if I didn't follow her commands. When she said okay, I turned again and almost dropped my shield. "You," I said, "are beautiful." I was about to expand on the subject, but I was interrupted by the sound of bugles. Then a loudspeaker blared, telling us to assemble in the square within the hour. Afterwards, I said again, afterwards. She came forward and pecked me on the forehead, very gently, then kissed me lightly on the mouth. It told me what I had hoped to know. We followed the others to a square outside, directly beneath the south wall of the stone fortress. The men were in battle uniforms, the women in white dresses. Breakfast was passed out, toast and champagne, and we shuffled around for a while. Then a single sharp word cut through the air. Gentlemen! Every head arced skyward. Ladies! A man had appeared on the topmost battlement of the fortress. He was lean and hawk-like, tall in spite of his slouch. Tanned joggers and dark leather boots coated his legs. A black shirt, open at the neck, stuck to his bony torso, and over his shoulders was draped a heavy black coat. For the benefit of those who do not know me, he said into the microphone, my name is Karl Groschkin. I am your employer. I am your landlord. I am your captain. You all have questions. I'm quite sure of it. And they shall be answered, but not now, not today. Today we must work. Today, my friends, we begin on the most important motion picture ever conceived. He did it all in that soft, husky voice I remembered. It had a hypnotic effect. The legions around me rumbled. Grushkin struck another pose. It isn't necessary, he said, for you to have scripts. That is the old-fashioned way, he went on sonorously to explain that the greater portion of the film had been completed. All that remained was the key battle scene, and that he would personally direct. Spontaneity, that was what he wanted. Spontaneity. We were to forget we were actors, forget scripts, forget movies. I am paying you for a job. Your only concern, therefore, is with the job. I will, however, tell you a few things here and now quickly. This place is called Resurrection Island. Does anyone know why it is called that? Dead quiet. Because, my good friends, what I have accomplished in the past months here will resurrect the lifeless corpse of Hollywood. With the release of this film, people throughout the world will stampede to the theaters, for it will be something no one has ever seen before. A spectacle. Spectacle? That word is puny. All of the adjectives are puny. They will have to make up new ones for us. I give you my word. The rumbling around me grew louder. That, Grushkin said, is our duty, and it is our honor to restore to the world its most precious possession, entertainment. Are you with me? A couple of obvious plants yelled, yes, yes, and then the sheep joined in. Yes, yes. A pass from the maestro, and silence. Then work with me, help me, do as you are told, and ask no questions. Not for a while. Do you have faith in motion pictures? Motion pictures on the large scale? Pictures that throb and pulse with life? Yes! Then have faith in Karl Grushkin. He turned the excitement up and down as if he were controlling it with a dial. His father had been one of the finest actors on the American stage, and the creature had learned plenty. Even Gloria got lost in the magnetism of the man's personality, and she was a sharp little kid. He had delivered that cornball speech before, I was sure, before every picture that he had made. I tried to whisper that to her. She didn't hear me. Now Grushkin was explaining the day's shooting. We were first-rank Roman fighters, we men, and the women, well, the women will be taken to another section of the set for additional footage, he said. A pause while the women were separated from us by a crew of flunkies Gloria squeezed my hand. "I'll see you tonight," she said. Well, that's afterwards enough, I thought. Besides, that floor looked awful hard to me. For some reason, I hung on to her. "Go on back to the hut now," I said. She looked at me as though I had turned purple. "And miss the fun? What's the matter with you, Artie?" I was about to answer when she pulled away. I watched her and the other women, looking like flocks of white gulls, moving off from the square. In moments, they were gone. "Men, you're led by Julius Caesar himself," cried Grushkin, waiting on the field of crushed rock by the banks of the Sombra. "Here, our 1,500 crack nervy warriors. You are to engage them in battle and conquer them." His voice grew tight. "These nervy are villains." The men around me grew tense. They knew they had enemies. They wanted to put on a good show. Emotion became ripe. "They have worked treachery upon Caesar, whom you love. They are of poor blood. You despise them. And you know that they must be thrust back on and on." On and on, yes. On and on he went, wrapping everyone up in his tale of the battle. Then he gave us some technical stuff, where the cameras would be, how to use the weapons, how we should follow everything he said to the letter. "And now, my fine Romans, into the breach!" Big Limp led off with a yell and sent us back to the field. The other crew of extras were there. They were dressed differently, but had the same half-wild, half-confused expression. The champagne for breakfast, well, that might have helped. A couple of trucks pulled up then, and some workers started unloading. Weapons. Each of us got 3 items: a broadsword, a club with a flanged metal head, and an axe. And that's when the answers came. Not that I was jolted with surprise. The contract, the secrecy, the big routine, the island, everything. These weapons weren't made out of hard rubber. They weren't plywood or plastic or crystal candy. They were real. I started to move when suddenly the air got full of music, bright yellow martial music in fast tempo, and a loudspeaker started screeching. Men, listen to me. You all have your weapons. You know that they are genuine. The swords will cut, the axes will split, and the maces will take amends. And the maces will take a man's head off. And that is my secret. This battle scene will not be faked. There will be blood, but it will be real blood. There will be death, and it will be real death. And it will be the most revolutionary thing that ever hit the screen. I looked around, tried to find Grushkin, and cameras were everywhere from every angle, but there was no sign of the director. His voice came from nowhere, yet everywhere, over the marching music. "Men, you have a choice now," he said. "You can call the idea ridiculous, lay down your weapons, and refuse to cooperate. That is your right. I can't force you into it, not even with a contract. But if you do this cowardly thing, if you pull out now, what will you do? Go to work in offices? In shipyards? Will you dig ditches for a living? Because the motion picture industry doesn't need you. It doesn't want atmosphere anymore. It wants actors. And you're not actors. You're extras. Extras, a vanishing breed." The voice stopped, but the silence held every man in the field. Only the music roared above the silence and somehow under it. Then Grushkin's voice snaked huskily through the air again. It's a risk you'll be taking, but I'll pay. To each brave man who survives, whether wounded or whole, I offer a bonus of $1,000 plus a contract without options for 2 years. The extras hooted and hollered. They yelled and lifted up their weapons. It was like a fantasy. The music swelled, wild, and becoming maniacal, urging them to move. And these poor guys started falling for it. Someone from the other camp, one of Grushkin's goons, picked up a heavy rock and hurled it. It struck one of our boys in the chest. He, in turn, picked up a heavier rock. The goon dodged, and the battle was on. A little music, a phony pep talk from Grushkin, and 3,500 men were ready to sacrifice their lives. Then I thought of Gloria, and a chill went down my spine. I got a few steps. Guards at the river, the north and south exits, were blocked. No choice except to wade through the brawling pack, straight through, and head for the direction they had taken the women. It was chaos already. They were bellowing and cursing. There was the sound of steel against steel. The loudspeaker cried, "Kill! Kill!" over and over, and they started to kill. A guy with a beard in front of me lifted his arm and brought the tip of his axe down on another guy's shoulder. A sword flashed down silver, came up red. I pushed forward. An old man of 70 at least turned. His helmet was on crooked, and he was grinning through dirty teeth. "You a Roman?" he yelled, brandishing his mace. I told him yes, but he didn't believe me. Instead, he raised the mace. There wasn't anything else for me to do. I rammed the flat of my broadsword against his throat, hard. He gagged and fell over. It was a nightmare. These weren't extras anymore. They were Romans and nervy, out for blood. I kept pushing forward, thinking of Gloria, out of my skin, thinking of Grushkin and Welch. And I was lucky. Something sharp bit into my arm, but I pulled away in time. Somehow, out of all this carnage, I managed to reach the square below the fortress. But I wasn't alone. 2 nervi stood there, grinning, giggling. There was fever in their eyes. "Let me through," I said. "I don't want to fight." "Kill!" cried the loudspeaker. "Kill! Kill!" The first warrior, a female face from old westerns, snorted. What are you, yellow bastard? "Yeah," I said. "I don't feel so good." "You're gonna feel worse, doll. Come on, Barney." They charged, and all of a sudden, I didn't feel so heroic. I looked back, but that way was impossible. I'd have to join the battling throng. I tried to sprint to the left, but the two had separated. The one called Barney advanced, axe in hand. I let him get closer. Then I shut my eyes, and I swung the broadsword at his legs. The sharp edge went halfway through the bones. Barney squealed and toppled, freeing the sword. The other guy let out a string of curses and came loping. I turned and pelted in the direction of the Colosseum. The Colosseum. He caught me at the entrance, tried to grab, only his fingers slipped on the blood that was seeping from my wound. It wasn't much of a wound, but it saved me. I got my other arm around his throat, tightened, and pulled out the axe. He just fell and lay still. I dropped the axe, crept silently through the entrance, and stopped until my heart began to beat, close to something normal. Then, because I didn't want to fight again, because I was tired and sick, I went down inside the stone bowl. I was trading one nightmare for another. I had wondered where the women were. Now I knew. They were here in front of me in the big clay arena, what was left of them anyway. The lions had gotten the rest. It took a while, but eventually I found Gloria. The white dress was mostly red now and torn to shreds, just as her flesh was torn. A wide open scar ran down the side of her face, and she was dead. I hadn't been in love with her or anything. She'd just been a nice girl, and I wanted to help her, sure, and be with her more, too. But nothing more. And something happened to me then, looking at the clawed-up mess of dead meat. Something big and new happened. Up to that moment, the only person I'd ever really hated was a weak son of a bitch named Wild. Now, I hated somebody else. Now, I had a chance to do one good thing. I touched Gloria's hair once, turned, and ran out of the arena, out into the field. Then I hoped somebody would get in my way. But no one did. By now the battle was going full tilt. It had moved from the field of crushed rock to the square. The Nervi were being driven back, their ranks decimated by the Romans. I spotted him after a while, standing tall against the turrets, his lean body now in Roman garb, angled over, his eyes gleaming, watching, telling me the whole story. Grushkin wasn't interested in making a movie. He was playing God. God and Caesar and Napoleon and Alexander and all the great and powerful men who ever lived. I thought of Gloria, of how she must have felt when the animal jumped at her, when she realized what was going to happen. It wasn't a lion that killed her, I thought. No, it was Grushkin. He killed her, just as he was killing all those other gullible, ignorant people. For Caesar! For Rome! For Rome! There wasn't any decision to be made. I tried the doors to the fortress first, found them locked, the windows barred. I circled around and found a tree. I climbed it, edged out on its highest branch, swung over to a small opening. Sober, I'd never be able to do that, but I was drunk now, drunk with hate. So I started up the stones. I got to the top after a couple of years and found a guard waiting. He swung his sword and took a small strip of skin off my elbow. I wheeled and brought the mace down hard and let go of it. That left me with the sword, but it would be enough. Down below, the tumult was reaching a new pitch of fury. The screams filtered like the wild, idiotic cries of birds. You could hear the cameras, though, at least in your mind, turning, getting all the blood and death onto film. At the end of the stone alley, by a turret, one of Grushkin's lieutenants stood. He held a spear and looked pretty embarrassed, also pretty cold-blooded. His back was turned, though, and there was a lot of noise. My broadsword went halfway through him. I felt ashamed, but I hadn't any choice. He guarded Grushkin, and Grushkin was killing hundreds. I went the length of the alley to the corner, and I flattened there. 8 or 9 feet away stood the creature and his pet cameraman. They weren't talking, just looking. The hate bubbled up again, hot and true inside, and I ran forward blindly. The cameraman whipped around. Too late. Way too late. Grushkin turned, stared at his man, who lay draped grotesquely across the battlements. Then he looked at me, and his eyes probed deep. "You're Arthur Wilde, a writer." "That's right," I said. "What are you after?" "You," I said, taking a step. He appraised the situation, saw that I wasn't kidding, wasn't hunting a deal. And then he grinned. And that gave me chills. I don't know why. "Very nice," he said. "Actually, a fine war. And then a duel between the principals. Just like a movie, isn't it, Mr. Wilde?" "Not quite." His voice had started to lull me. And that was the point. By the time I pushed myself out of it, his hand was halfway to his Luger. Almost any other gun has more muzzle velocity. But of course he would have a Luger. "I wouldn't shout for help, Grushkin." He nodded. Slowly, he unfastened his cape and let it slide down. Then, in one fluid motion, he drew his sword from his scabbard. In the softest, weirdest voice imaginable, a voice that told me he had lost his marbles long ago, he said, "Action!" And action he got. He slashed and hacked with those heavy, heavy hands about his sword, and we slashed back and forth without drawing blood once. Then I dented his breastplate, and he jumped up onto the wall. He slashed down at me, but I missed him, and he missed me. I joined him there. Despite his famous foil lessons, I found out that broadswords were not his style. He was getting winded with the heavy sword, and after a few minutes it was clear that I could kill him. Only that wasn't what I wanted to do, because with Grushkin dead, the battle would rage on, probably until every man was finished. He didn't realize his weakness, thank God. His eyes blazed, and he roared with laughter every time the steel sang through the air. Then he got a little too confident. He raised his right arm high, poised for a long chop. I swung the blade, and it connected flat with his wrist. His fingers spread, and the sword clattered loose. His smile went away. "Over to the mic," I said, showing him how easy it would be to disembowel him. "Fast. Turn up the speakers. Now stop the fighting." "Well, that would be impossible," he said. "Do it. Do it anyway." He glanced at the glittering steel tip of my sword and shrugged, and then spoke into the microphone. Men, lay down your arms. Cease." It had no effect. He smiled at me triumphantly. "You see, there's no stopping them." "Wrong," I said. "There's a way, and you know what it is. One word, pal. Good and loud." The sword touched his neck. He stiffened. I hadn't expected such cleverness from a fan magazine columnist. However, it doesn't matter. It is still my finest achievement, all on film. Come on. He cleared his throat and barked one word into the mic. Cut! And that did it. Like old trick horses, the extras responded to the command and laid down their weapons. The battle was over. I must have glanced away because I was too late to stop Grushkin. He loped over to the highest turret, crawled to the top, and stood on the edge. He swayed there for a second, looking at me, and I searched his face. But it wasn't pain I saw. It wasn't surrender either. I don't know what it was. I don't think he knew himself. He had 50 feet straight down to figure it out. I'm back in movie secrets now, putting down the facts on Piper Laurie's Hidden Romance. People don't talk about Resurrection Island anymore. They've forgotten the 1,600 men and women who died there. It was big news for a while, sure. Spreads in Life and Time, pictures of Grushkin, of me, of the hired goons, the battlefields, the fortress. But news doesn't stay hot long, particularly in Hollywood. Welch, he got his story, though, and I got a raise. And I guess that's something. And when the nights get too lonely, well, there's always Las Vegas. I mean, there's nothing really wrong with that receptionist who works there. She's a doll and pretends to understand. When I wake up sometimes, screaming. That is Resurrection Island by Charles Beaumont. A little touch of something special from a guy who started working in Hollywood, passed away before he was 40. Written in the 1950s, discovered in the 1990s. A Touch of a Creature. It is included in that book and was republished in 2000 by Cemetery Dance magazine. Now, one of the things that, let me just say this. I'm going to put this in the chat. Are any of you fans? Okay, first of all, let's say this. We know Charles Beaumont, Richard Matheson, Ray Bradbury, George Clayton Johnson, William F. Nolan. Those guys were friends, right? I think Chuck Beaumont also knew Harlan Ellison, who was a little bit younger than those guys, maybe 10 or 5 years younger. But as you know, because I've spoken about it before and I have clips of this in my intros and outros, I'm a big fan of The Night Stalker, right? Okay. You probably know that Richard Matheson wrote the first two screenplays for the Night Stalker TV movie and the Night Strangler TV movie. The first, Night Stalker, based on the novel, which had been unpublished by Jeff Rice, and Universal or Dan Curtis bought the rights to that. And then Richard Matheson wrote the script, based in Las Vegas. Right. Now, who can tell me what Carl Kolchak did for a living? I'm going to go into the chats. You let me know what Carl Kolchak did. And Bad Bird Boogie says, that's the most intense piece of fiction you've chosen to read for us. Wow, that was awesome. Well, I think Charles Beaumont's family would be pretty happy to hear that. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? That's awesome, man. That is super, super cool to think that a guy, I wonder if his family will ever find that out. That's cool. That literally was a wild story, says Bad Bird Boogie. So can anybody tell me what Carl Kolchak used to do? And feel free to look it up if you want to. Kolchak the Night Stalker. What was his profession? Okay, so I'll give you a lead in on that. And if nobody gets it, I'll go 5, 4, 3, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. He was a reporter. He was an investigative reporter. And the first story begins in Las Vegas. Yes, Taylor Saunders has got it. Newspaper reporter. Exactly, Taylor. Right on. You got it, man. So Kolchak had a boss named Tony Vincenzo, played by Simon Oakland. And, of course, Carl Kolchak, played by Darren McGavin, who was sort of the shadow producer of the show, of the TV series after they did the first 2 TV movies. Right on. Now, think about this. And he was gumshoe. He had sneakers. Yep, absolutely. Bad Bird Boogie, absolutely. Gumshoe reporter. So it was sort of a noir reporter type thing meets ghost hunter, sort of like Karnacki, the ghost hunter, or any of those traditional ghost hunter stories, right? Now, which, of course, Karnak the Magnificent, you can see where Johnny Carson got his Karnak the Magnificent. So anyway, Kolchak had a boss, Tony Vincenzo, his editor, right? What in the series did Vincenzo drink all the time? Even in the first or second movie, what was he drinking all the time? Can anybody put it in the chat? You let me know what he was drinking, what he used to drink all the time. Tony Vincenzo. I'll give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Milk. He was always drinking milk. Why was he always drinking milk? 5, 4, 3. No, not gin and tonic. 5, 4. Why did he drink milk? Yeah. You got it. You guys got it. Because he had ulcers. So if you go into, he had stomach problems. Exactly, Taylor. Exactly. So I think Richard Matheson being friends with Charles Beaumont, I think, and I don't know, I can't say this completely because I'm trying to remember what the novel of because Jeff Rice had Vincenzo in it. And it was the reporter and his boss was always like, Carl, we can't print this. This is crazy sort of thing, right? But I think the ulcer and milk thing and this template of Kolchak in the TV scripts with Vincenzo arguing, calling Kolchak in, giving him this assignment that leads to something supernatural. I think that even though Richard Matheson had been given the assignment to write the first 2 Kolchak movies, I think he drew some themes. I bet you anything he had read this story before it was published or anything because he was friends with Charles Beaumont. Maybe Beaumont asked him to look at a draft and he was inspired to put in some of those elements either in honor of Charles Beaumont's interaction with the editor of this movie magazine publication in Resurrection Island, or, either he did it intentionally or he absorbed it and it was like, part of a good theme that he could put forward. And he knew the story had not been published. So it was like, that's okay. I'll put this into my story, whatever, right? Now, I know I haven't spoken with RC, Richard Christian, for a while, and I should try to email him and see if I can get him on the show sometime. But I think it would be fun to ask him, like, do you know anything about that? Because literally, I was listening to the Quasar Spectra version of this, and I was like, you'll see it. I put my comment in there. I was like, again, I can't say this with absolute surety, but I have a feeling that when Richard Matheson did these interactions with Vincenzo drinking the milk because he had an ulcer, he was setting that up because of the template he had seen in this story, and he had been friends with Charles Beaumont. So I bet you anything that Richard Matheson had read this story or heard, talked to him about it, maybe done a draft, look over for it or something like that, and then did it as a way to a bit of honor for his friend who had passed away, this interaction from this story that was never published. I don't know. Pretty interesting, huh? And again, I can't say with any, absolute surety, but it does seem quite uncanny that you've got a Kolchak-like dynamic between the reporter and his editor. And then they mentioned Vegas, right? And now, again, the key thing there is the original Jeff Rice novel did happen in Vegas, right? And the whole idea was it's a vampire hunter in Vegas. And I sort of picked up that theme with my novella Bite. I couldn't do the Kolchak character, so I did a different character named Sylvester Kolchak. And nobody, that's actually the first time I've ever mentioned it. I don't even think my brother knows that. I don't even think he knows. But yeah, that's why his name is Sylvester Cole, because it's Kolchak. Now, also, I should let you know, the name Kolchak actually comes from a very heroic anti-Soviet Ukrainian fighter when Stalin was moving into Ukraine. And a guy named Kolchak basically held off like this entire town against the Soviets for a long time. Like he's considered a mythological hero for the Ukrainians for quite a while. Very interesting stuff. So yeah, fascinating stuff. So again, go to the Quasar Spectra YouTube channel and you'll find that. And I think you'll really enjoy it. And he doesn't flub up. I mean, I was doing it live. I might cut out some of the flubs, and I didn't flub up too many times in this one. But yeah, pretty good stuff. And I think that'll be it. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. It's been quite an amazing time, and I'm going to get a little food. And tomorrow, don't forget that America Unplugged is on at noon. Knights of the Storm is on at 2:00, both on Rumble, and Knights of the Storm is also on the Tony Arterburn channel on YouTube. And I don't know whether, I mean, not Knights of the Storm, America Unplugged is on at noon on the Tony Arterburn channel. And I don't know whether the Knights are going to be on there too. And I think that's it. Before I go, thank you, Wally. He says, great show, Guard. Thank you. Love the show, Guard. Feel better. Thank you, Smuhosky. Yeah, I feel really, really weird right now. I just want to let you know. I just cannot wait for this to stop. It's just really, really rough. It's definitely difficult, and it gets in my way of a lot of things. So again, anybody who's dealing with long COVID, you'll find that their symptoms, like I went and did a bunch of investigating. I've had to do so much research on it. And one of the things is you almost have like a pink eye thing. That is almost constantly with me unless I take a little what's the stuff like antihistamine, or not antihistamine, but like a thing for people who have allergies, like non-drowsy stuff. And I don't like taking stuff like that. I like, only natural things. I hardly even would ever do that in the past. But then absolute soreness. I was trying to move some wood around, stack some stuff up for my sister, and it's just crazy. It's just really, really weird. And the next day, it's just crazy. And the soreness and exhaustion, just pushing yourself up. I was going to mention at the start of the show that if you heard me moaning, I mean, literally, any time I've been moving today, bending down to do something or just getting up, it's been so much pain that I'm groaning. I'm in so much pain. It's just crazy, crazy, crazy. And the exhaustion is nuts. I've got an almost, and I don't want this to sound like a headache, but I want to report this in case you have anybody around you who's experiencing this thing. And also to let you know that, whoever it was who developed this, I mean, there's a money trail for this from EcoHealth Alliance and all this stuff. I don't think they could go to all those lengths to make up a fake money trail to pretend that there was something that they were developing. I think they did develop something. And I had the spike protein test after, and I didn't get the jab or anything like that, but I had the spike protein test months afterwards, and it came up positive. So I had to take all this stuff to try to destroy that. I had to take ivermectin again, all these things. And whatever it did affected my vagus nerve, my mitochondrial response. And I was always a person who operated, or sort of made myself operate at a very energetic level. So I can approximate that, but it's not without massive effort, like nothing you can possibly imagine. So the only thing I can equate it to is, imagine if you've ever run a road race, and whether it's a half marathon or marathon, you get about halfway through or 3/4 of the way through, you're hitting the wall. That's what it's like all the time. And it's not even exactly like that. It's bizarre because it affects your ability to be able to focus and get work done without feeling super, super tired. And it's very frustrating. And so there are some things, as I mentioned, someone inside the chat, and I don't know whether it was Wally or maybe it was Smoo or I am Marty. Somebody mentioned this bilateral stellate ganglion block, which sounds very invasive. It is not. And it's a little Novocaine inside either side of the neck. That seems to give people help. That's like $1,500, I think, depending on where you get it. I've got to get that done. And, that's one of the reasons I want to, it's a bad bird boogie is there. I'm sorry to hear that, Guard. Yeah, it's wild. And again, as John Lydon said, anger is an energy, and you have to know how to translate it and focus it. So sometimes if I'm listening to intense music or whatever, that picks me up a little bit, and then I can channel it properly. And there's always hope, and it has gotten me to read the Bible and understand, like I said, you don't get physics from physics. You get physics from metaphysics. By definition, it has to come. You can't, material doesn't create itself. And, if you start to looking into the books of the Bible, you start looking into contemporaneous accounts outside the books of the Bible, you realize Christ was real. And then you look into it further, and it's quite interesting. And you don't want to tie circumstances or think you're reading a signal into everything. But you probably have experienced things where you say, that was too much of a coincidence. There's a signal there. And this has happened to me over and over again. And you can ask Richard Christian Matheson about the dreams that I would have that are predictive dreams. And so there's something else out there. And so, now I'm at a point where I realize, okay, this is for my soul. I was actually given a blessing. But I tell you, it hurts. It really hurts. It's tough. And it's also very frustrating, just to sort of let you know again, because this has been a number of years now. And I had hoped to get married and do a lot of things, start up this, to do this more during the day and really expand. I was doing the work for MRC TV, and I was able to work out a schedule where I could do those things. And sometimes I'd even shoot video for MRC TV, and only Eric Shiner knew that I had one of the headaches. He could tell. He's like, "Oh, you had one of the headaches today, didn't you, dude?" And I was like, "Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. I was throwing up before I got on the camera. It's bad. It's really, you can't, unless you experience this, you have no idea how bad this is. Like, this is way, way, way beyond anything I've ever heard anybody experience, except for like cancer patients getting chemo. That's how bad this is. It's that bad. All the time. So there's nobility in the struggle. So never forget that no matter how bad you are, you can give someone some positivity. And if somebody doesn't maybe give you the appreciation you're hoping, or maybe you were hoping for a little bit of affection or something, some understanding, communication can help. And try to phrase it in a way, especially if it's within your family, that isn't angry and, shows love. Because you'd hate to snap at somebody, it's tough. It's tough when you're in pain a lot. And luckily, I worked a lot at it when I was a kid. And so I was able to overcome getting made fun of pretty bad when I was a kid. And I try to be friendly, and that works. Trying to be good to people. So that works out. So, all right, I better go. I got a note in the mail, and I'll read that to you on Monday, because the ending of it is so great. And maybe go for Theology Thursday on that too. That would be great. And let me know if you ever want to come on and talk about experiences, family members that really did something admirable. Again, just drop me a line. I'd love to open up the show to you to do more than, all the things we do. To add more to this would be great. And Bad Bird Boogie says, "I'll start wearing my mask again to protect you." And that's the thing. I got the COVID from a dude who'd been double jabbed. Is the guitarist from one of my favorite bands. I won't say what band it was, but it's not The Damned. And so, yes, and don't forget, if you, is that, the co-pilot's been down here. She's been sleeping over here. She's finally starting to come out. She's such a pretty kitty. She's so good. She's co-pilot number 2. But if you want to support the show, anything like that, not to try to engender support or anything like that, it is a really big deal to ask for support at the Substack. You can go over there and sign up for like $4 a month, $5 a month. You can contribute here. And yes, we are going to do a fundraiser, and I'm going to be putting that together soon with a lot of great assistance from great people, many of whom you already know, who have their own shows and are really wonderful people. So I'll leave you with a little Outer Limits outro. Next week, we're going to do some TV Tuesday with another great TV show. I've been putting the notes together on that. I cannot wait. I would play The Damned for you. Don't forget, their 50th anniversary show is coming up tomorrow. It's going to be amazing at Wembley Stadium. Wembley Stadium. Put hashtag The Damned into X. Check them out. Oh, I love those guys. Great, great people. I'm going to leave you with the Outer Limits outro. Have a great night, everybody. God bless. Thank you so much for believing in freedom and creativity and peace. Take care. God bless. See you.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to the outer limits.